The Secrets of Middle-earth is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give.
You're listening to The Secrets of Middle-earth, where we discuss the hidden themes and deeper layers found in the works of J.R.R. Tolkien, whether in his writings or in any of the media derived from them. Happy early Father's Day to all the dads out there. I'm Jeff Haecker, and joining me today are Thomas Sanjurjo. Hi, Thomas, and happy Father's Day.
Hey, Jeff. Thank you.
And Thomas Salerno. Hi, Thomas.
Hey, Jeff.
And Kaitlyn Facista. Hi, Kaitlyn.
Hello.
Be sure to follow The Secrets of Middle-earth in Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or any podcast directory or app. And you can find us on social media at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, or on Twitter, where we are at SQPN, or on Instagram, where we are at StarQuest Network. And we wanted to let y'all know we now have some merch. We have a new shirt that you can take a look at and order at sqpn.com/merch. It's pretty cool. It has the Hail Mary written in Elvish by Tolkien himself. And it has images of the 4 races of Middle-earth, or the 4 good races, I should say, of Middle-earth. So and you can order it in a variety of combinations of colors. And so we just wanted to encourage y'all to order a shirt and support the show and the network.
They're really cool shirts too. Just so everybody's like that. Like I'm super impressed with them. Like they're really neat.
You are gonna want one of these shirts.
It's very, very cool. Everyone should at least check them out and see what they look like.
And Father's Day is coming up. So there, if you know a Tolkien fan in your life, it's a perfect gift for them. All right. And today's episode is a Father's Day special. So again, happy Father's Day to Thomas and all the fathers out there. And I just want to give a shout out to my dad, who took me to see Fellowship, not realizing it was 3 hours long back in the day. So thanks, Dad. And so today we'll be discussing father figures of Tolkien's Legendarium. But before we started that, we wanted to discuss some of the Valar names that everyone wrote in with. So everyone had a great response to our last episode about the Valar. And we wanted to share some of the names that you all wrote. So Thomas, did you want to go ahead and read some of these for us?
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, this would be the point where I lose the document. Okay, here it is. Yeah. So we, as Jeff mentioned, we got a lot of great responses from the fans with Valar names, and I just wanted to read a few of the best. So Paul Leone on YouTube, and this is great because he not only gives us a Valar name, but he has a little story attached to it. So Paul says, "My name is Ranyar the Wanderer. He has no fixed abode, and in the elder days roamed freely from sunrise to sunset. Even now he goes to this place or that in Valinor, dwelling for a time with his exalted kin, or in the halls of the Vanyar, or in the havens of the Teleri. He and his folk guided the Eldar on the Great Migration, even though he spoke against it in no less strong terms than did Ulmo."
I love that.
Yeah, okay, so Paul knows his Silmarillion, apparently.
Yeah.
Right.
I
That was
love that.
Excellent.
Definite A for effort. Next, we have Doc Sweeney on Discord. Says their name is Milana, Lady of the Cowboy Boots. Which is great.
I love that.
That's awesome.
Some of them are great. Like what they end up being the Lord or Lady of.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Ryan Nafziger, also on Discord, says Riawe, Master of Music, which I thought was very Tolkienian, given the music of the Ainur.
Yeah, that one is very cool.
Yeah. Catherine, also on Discord, says Kavana, Mistress of the Crocheted Blankets, which I thought was very nice. Yeah, we have a couple of those blankets at our house. You know, just crocheted blankets that my grandmother made. So that was, I thought that was a nice name.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope I'm pronouncing this name right. Louise Iwasik via email says, "My name is Lovana, who delights in gardens. We also have a Timstay, Lord of Writing, and an Erorian, ruler of puzzles here."
Nice. Those are all great.
A great family of Valar. So yeah, no, everybody who submitted names, I thought they were all great, and it was really hard to pick just 5 of them. But yeah, I'm so glad that the fans had such a fun time with our little Valar creating game.
Yes, it's so fun.
Yeah, that's a plug to join our Discord, because if you go on there, you can see a lot more names probably, and because a lot were shared there. So very cool. And then Thomas, I think you also had some Rings of Power news for us as well before we kind of jump into the main topic for the night.
Yeah, so I heard the other day that it's either been leaked or announced. I'm not exactly sure which, but that Shelob is going to play a role in the Rings of Power season 2.
Nice.
That's going to be really something.
Yeah. Yeah, as Kaitlyn, you and I were kind of talking about before we were recording, as long as they don't go the video game route with Shelob.
Yes,
and
I forget if it's
yeah.
Shadow of War or Shadow of Mordor, but where they have kind of personified Shelob as a very pretty lady who is kind of Sauron's girlfriend. I'm not totally sure. I didn't play the video game, but that was the impression it gave me. And
might not be wrong.
It was a bit. I just don't think that I want to see that. I would really just like to see a nice, big, scary spider. Like, please.
That's too much D&D going into your Lord of the Rings there. It needs to be the other way around. More Lord of the Rings in your D&D, less the other direction.
Yeah, I remember when season 1 ended, she was one of the characters that I wanted to see in season 2, because since season 1 ends, spoiler alert, with Sauron arriving in Mordor, I'm like, okay, so Shelob's been in Mordor for like since at least the end of the First Age, I think. So they could definitely do, either her first meeting with Sauron or Sauron sending somebody, potentially Adar, to get eaten by Shelob. So there's a lot they could do with that character. But yeah, and apparently it's only supposed to be like just in a single episode. She's not going to be a major part of the season.
I'm not sure about how many episodes she'll be in, but I think it was it was leaked by Fellowship of Fans, and I believe they just called her a minor role, so that wasn't very specific. But yeah, I'm kind of curious to see how they're going to do this with the time compression, and because if Shelob was already in Mordor before Sauron got there, but Mordor was not Mordor, and it was still kind of the lush green Southlands 15 minutes ago, I don't know how that will work, but that will be interesting.
She could have been underground.
Yeah.
Now she's
I was thinking about the tunnels that the orcs all dug. I wonder if they're going to somehow be used by her or something like that. Maybe she'll crawl up through one of them or something.
And it would be interesting if they did like, okay, so like the flood in the tunnels, if the flood kind of drove her up from deeper underground, like they flooded her home.
Yeah.
And so now she's like in the pass of Cirith Ungol and like eating stray orcs or something.
That would be really cool. I'm excited to see whatever they're going to do with her. I also hoped that Halbrand wouldn't be Sauron, but now that he is, I'm really happy about it. So it's hard. Like maybe I say now that I won't be happy with human Shelob, but knowing me, I'm probably going to end up loving it. So we'll just.
A rewatch really does that show justice. Like it really is. It's worth a second run through. So
I was talking with my brother about this over the weekend because he recently rewatched it, and he's like, "Yeah, like it's just fun." It is. If you're a Tolkien fan, you get all the references, and there are things that are different, but it's like, as long as you kind of compartmentalize in your head that you're like, okay, this is a different universe than the prime canon universe. I don't know. Maybe as a comic book fan, I'm just used to doing that. To compartmentalizing other universes is like different.
It's just that other Spider-Man, right?
I'm sure that makes it a lot easier because I don't think a lot of Tolkien fans are used to having to do that. And so that's kind of been the struggle.
Well, speaking of other compartmentalized things, since this is coming out in June, another big piece of Lord of the Rings news is Magic the Gathering is doing a run of Lord of the Rings cards. And
Right.
if you haven't heard about this, if you're not a Magic fan, this might not be very interesting to you, but it looks really cool. I think they're really neat. I think the concept of the crossovers that Magic has been doing lately have been very interesting. They've been getting a lot of press and a lot of kind of motion into other fandoms. My favorite part about this one, though, is that there is going to be a single printed card of the Ring of Power. So there's lots of one ring
What?
cards available, but there's one card that's a foil card, limited edition, one of a kind. It's the only one that's going to be made, and it's going to be all in black speech, and it's going to have all of the information of the card in black speech. So that's yeah, I know. It's like
That's
when I
so
found that out, I was like,
cool.
no way. And so I went and checked that out. And then beyond that, there are going to be soul cards, which are the other rings. So there's only 19,000 of them that are going to be printed, which is the rest of the rings. So the three rings for the Elvish kings, the dwarves, and then the humans, and they're all in variations on the speeches as well. So really, I'm super excited that they like really went all in on this and said, no, we're going to
Yes.
do one card, and that's going to be the
So only one
one of its
person in
kind.
the world will get that
That's
card.
crazy.
We'll get that card,
Oh my gosh.
and it's
I love
randomized.
that.
It's just going to be thrown into the decks and randomized.
It's like a
so
golden
if you buy,
ticket.
Exactly.
Ugh.
And so
But now people are going to go out and buy truckloads of those packs of cards, though, trying to get.
they do anyway. So this is not
okay,
a really
yeah.
huge difference from.
I mean, if you think about it, though, like even buying Pokemon cards now, every store you go to has a limit on Pokemon
Yeah.
cards. So I'm sure they're going to
okay.
set limits.
Yeah, that's probably. I mean, I'm sure that Wizards of the Coast doesn't mind if they sell massive amounts of Magic cards in the interest of people trying to get that the
Yeah,
one ring.
I would just hope that like everyone who wants to get one can find one and they don't, end up on eBay like.
Oh, this one's
immediately.
going to though.
Well, yes,
This
obviously.
one.
this one.
Yeah.
But like, because they kind of made it into a little game. So I would like, anyone to be able to play.
This is fun. And so for anybody who has never done Magic, I really recommend. It's really interesting. There is a whole set of rules about doing draft decks. If you're not really into it, but you would like to learn, and you can get behind like figuring out some rules, there's starter decks. That's the best way to learn. But if you really want to try out like the spirit of Magic in itself, learn how to do a booster draft. And it's basically like $100 worth of cards. You buy one package of cards, and then you sit around a table and each person opens up one pack. They take one card from the pack and then pass the rest of the cards to the right or left, and you do that until everybody has a deck or enough cards to make a deck, and then there you go, you start playing with whatever you have. And it's a really, really fun way to make a deck in Magic and play. I do it with my kids. We've done it a couple of times now, and it's a blast. But yeah, not, so you don't have to like go out and go crazy and buy like every single really expensive card that's out there, or millions of packs until you get exactly the thing you want, unless you're after the One Ring, of course.
Right.
So yeah, that's coming
Very
out.
cool.
That's coming out in June, towards the end of June.
That's so cool. They should do a Silmarillion pack and just print 3 Silmaril cards, and then people will be killing each other over them.
There you go. That's the next one. Now you're giving them the idea for the next one.
All right, very cool. Yeah, I played Magic back in the day, but before they did all the new licensing stuff, so it's probably been 20 something years since I've actually played Magic, but I still have my cards, so
There you go.
very
This
cool.
might be worth
Well,
something now.
yeah, maybe. All right. Well, I think if nobody else has any news or other tidbits to go into, I think we can kind of start into our main topic for the night. But before we kind of start talking about the Legendarium fathers, I didn't know if anyone wanted to mention anything about Tolkien's father or him being a father. The only things I had noted were just, as you may remember from previous discussions for our audience, his father died when he was very young, so even before his mother died. And so he kind of had a spiritual father in the church, in the oratory who his mother kind of entrusted him to. So he kind of had that as his father figure. I forget the priest's name off the top of my head, but and then as a father, he did, we all know, as we discussed before, he did all kinds of imaginative things with his kids. He did the Santa letters and told crazy, amazing stories with them, based on random things his kids did or found or whatever. So But did anyone have anything else they wanted to discuss about that before we?
Yeah, so earlier today, since I knew we were going to discuss this topic, I took out this book that me and a bunch of other writers for the Voyage Comics website put together. It's called Tolkien and Faith. And one of the writers, actually the founder of Voyage Comics, Philip Kozlowski, wrote a little essay on Tolkien as a father. And there were there was one particularly funny bit in here, and it bounces off of something you said, Jeff, about him reading and originally kind of crafting some of these stories for his kids. In the essay, there's a quote that they use from Christopher Tolkien, that he wrote for the 50th anniversary of The Hobbit, and I thought it was pretty funny, where Christopher writes, "He, my father, also remembered that I, being between 4 and 5 years old, was greatly concerned with the petty consistency as the story unfolded, and that on one occasion I interrupted. Last time you said Bilbo's front door was blue, and you said Thorin had a gold tassel on his hood, but you've just said that Bilbo's front door was green, and that the tassel on Thorin's hood was silver. At which point my father muttered, 'Damn the boy,' and then strode across the room to his desk to make a note." And I thought that was rather humorous that, you know, as he's telling essentially the first draft version of The Hobbit to his son Christopher is helping him with the sort of the consistency, making sure everything's the right color. And, you know, I just thought that was hilarious. And Philip ends his little essay with this great reflection saying, "Tolkien's greatest legacy was not his multi-million-dollar estate, but the devotion and care of his children. All he accomplished in life was for them, and it was through his call to fatherhood that he became the greatest fantasy writer the world has ever known."
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's, you know, of all the great reflections of fatherhood we have in Middle-earth, it all kind of comes from him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, at least for the first quote about the story about the messing up the color, I was like, if anyone who has kids knows, if your kids love the same story and you read it every night and then you mess up something or you miss a page or something, they let you know. So that's definitely in line with the very in line. So it's funny that we can all kind of have something in common with Tolkien there. Very cool. Well, if that is, so I guess we can kind of move into our discussing the actual Legendarium fathers. Thomas Sanjurjo, I'll go to you first. Who is your favorite father, or who would you like to discuss first here?
So this one's tough. I'm split between two, and their names are very similar, which I thought was really humorous. As I was looking through this, I was like, no, these are actually both my favorites. And I think the reason that they're both my favorites is because they're men of action, and they're men that that led by example, and their children pick up on that example. Like, you see their children pick up on that example. And in one case, we have a child that picks up on that example but fails, and in the other case, we have a child that picks up on that example and like really becomes one of the greatest heroes of his age. And that's so the first I wanted to talk about was Yarendil, which is the half elf and the star is this incredible mythical figure in Tolkien's Legendarium, and he's mentioned in the Rings of Power, and I love the way that he's brought up and like what is said about him, and kind of that it's made this impression not only in this very big way about what he did historically, but also how it affected then his children afterwards. And it's so impressive to me because like he's a person that pursued his passions, but his passions weren't for himself. They were for others. And that it was recognized even to the point of that when he went back to the land of the Valinor and he should have been put to death for it, they recognized that the reason he came was not for his own glory, but for protecting others and for being the person who was there defending others. And that to me is just really cool. And the fact that he's like a star, like, you know, that he is actually a light in the sky. That's so neat. And as a boy who grew up with a father that was like always really involved in these really impressive things, I know what it is to like feel like I'm never going to live up to that. Like this guy is so cool. And like, in knowing that the things that he was involved in, the politics that he was involved in, and the stuff that he did, you know, it just, but it's also inspiring that, you know, he's just a man. You get to see him at home and see that he's just like me. Like there's no difference between us. It's just that he goes out every day and does great things. And that always inspired me. And I felt like that's kind of like, you see that in this heroic figure, that we don't get to know much about his fatherhood, but we know that he was a good example because the child that he has becomes such an incredible and impressive person. And then the turn of that is Elendil, which is the father of Isildur. And Elendil is, by all accounts, an incredible man. Like it leads the Númenóreans through a lot of really bad places, and still comes out the other side as a heroic figure. And so much so that when they go to confront Sauron, he's there in the front, and it's his blade that is shattered on Sauron that is then picked up by his son, who courageously carries on that same motion. We know that of course Isildur goes on to fail and is not able to destroy the ring, but we also get the sense that Isildur did not fail because he was incapable of destroying the ring. He felt like he could turn it to a good purpose. And so it's the danger of like being a person who cares for others so deeply that you are even willing to overlook the good for what might be possible. And that's kind of the sense that I get of Isildur. I'm interested to see like how the story takes him in the Rings of Power and kind of molds him into that figure. So those are my two dads that I wanted to bring up.
Yeah, very cool. And I think there's a good chance I think we've discussed the possibility of having the actor playing Elrond also playing Erendil in a flashback type of thing, or Elros. He could play both since Elros was, or no, I'm sorry. He could play
Elros was his twin.
But we could see a flashback to Erendil as well in the in at some point. So definitely on the table. And you have I know Isildur in the Rings of Power is great, so it'd be hopefully get to see a lot more of him.
And Elendil was fantastic.
Yeah.
He was one of my favorite characters.
Like, he's just one of the best in the series. Absolutely.
Very cool. Well, Thomas Salerno, do you want to go next with your dad pick?
Sure. So I wanted to talk about Theoden, who is I really like Theoden. He's one of my favorite characters. I mean, I have a new favorite character every time I re-listen to the Lord of the Rings on audiobook. And this time it's Theoden. I really like Theoden. And because he's not a perfect character, right? He goes through that period where he's under Wormtongue's influence and Wormtongue's domination. But especially in the appendices, you learn a lot more about his backstory and about his history. You know, he's a widower. His wife died in childbirth to his son Theodred, and his brother-in-law Eamund died fighting orcs, and then he adopts Eamund's children, Eomer and Eowyn, as his own. He raises them in his house as his own children. He really has, you know, a lot of love for Eowyn. He calls her dearer than daughter. You know, he's very protective, which of course, you know, that clashes with her need to strike out on her own. But, you know, there's never any love lost between the two. And you can tell that he was a very caring father figure. And he's also a father in a sort of way to Merry. Because when Merry, you know, becomes his esquire, he says to Theoden, "A father you shall be to me." And he just immediately, you know, just sort of takes Merry under his wing. And it's so great. And it's so, you know, it's such a beautiful thing to have this, you know, good man, this really, solid, virtuous man. Especially once he's freed from Wormtongue's domination, he's courageous to the point where he goes to a battle knowing that not only that he might die, probably will die, but that everyone else, that he's leading all these men probably to their deaths. Not just at the Hornburg, but at Minas Tirith. He knows the size of the force that they're up against, tens of thousands of orcs and Easterlings and all the rest. And he's like, we are probably, and that's why he tries to hold Merry back, because Merry wants to go along. He's like, I won't have it said of me that I was always left behind. And Theoden's like, we're all going to our deaths. I took you under my wing to protect you. So, but then, when he gives his life for his country, and when he meets Merry on the battlefield, he's not angry about it. His last words to Merry, are so beautiful, where he's like, smoke and think of me, because he was going to talk to Merry about pipeweed and stuff like that. I just think that of the many men there are to look up to in Tolkien's Legendarium, to me, Theoden is a standout as a solid, virtuous man. And I think Tolkien did that on purpose, because he models the Rohirrim after kind of that Anglo-Saxon, Norse culture that he loved so much.
I feel like he's even a father to Aragorn during their time in Rohan. Like there's moments where Aragorn's still not sure about his about where his path is taking him, and especially following the death of Boromir, it's like he's able to really help him mourn and help him come back from this kind of dark place that he's tending toward. And then Helm's Deep, he's the leader. That's the impressive part, is like he knows at that point who Aragorn is. He's got a clear picture of everything, but he still takes the lead with all of the decisions that are made in that battle. And that's really it's an awesome, definitely a very good pick.
It's almost like he's a model for Aragorn on how to be a righteous king.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which I think is really great.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, always liked Theoden, and he's very well cast in the Jackson film. So if we see, I'm sure we'll have to talk at some point about the future of the remaking of Lord of the Rings films, because it's just hard to beat some of the casting. But very cool. And Kaitlyn, what about you for favorite father in the Legendarium?
Sure. So I picked Elrond to talk about. So I think it was fun that we talked about Elrond's father a couple minutes ago. But Elrond himself as a father he's someone with so much warmth and steadfast protection that I think really embodies a father so well. And I think it's really extraordinary that he's able to be such a good father in this sense. He raises his own sons and his daughter, but he also he plays a massive role in keeping the line of Isildur alive, and he's fostering the heirs of Isildur. I believe it says in their youth and in their old age throughout the ages, and then he's all the way up to Aragorn. He's a foster father to him, and I think it's so interesting because he doesn't really have a good example of a father, because not to say that his father isn't a good example, but it's just that his father isn't there, because his father, I think they depicted this really well in the Rings of Power, because he's kind of wrestling with this, like, my dad's still around, but he's, soaring up in the heavens as a star, and he did this massively heroic and sacrificial deed, but I can't talk to him. And I can't have this relationship with him that I want. And then on top of that, he's fostered in this very strange relationship by Maglor, one of the sons of Feanor, who kind of initially had almost kidnapped him and his brother. But then he's like, his heart is softened and he decides to kind of take care of the sons of Eärendil in this very strange way. But Tolkien writes that Maglor's heart was sick, but he loved him in like the capacity that he was able to. So that's it's very weird to me. But I think it's very interesting too that you can see Elrond. So he's lost his father, and then he's also had this very strange relationship with a kind of foster father figure. And even despite all of that, he doesn't become cold or detached, and he doesn't harden his heart or, close himself off from others, but instead he just exudes warmth. And we know of Elrond, he's described as being as kind as summer, and he welcomes his home, or he opens his home. He welcomes people throughout The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. And his home is kind of like the hub of wisdom, and it's a refuge for people who need him. And so I think with Elrond, we see a lot of wisdom and a lot of just like, it's like to me, it seems like a kind of tender love, but it's also very strong. And I think that really expresses like what you want in a father. You want them to be strong and someone to take care of you, but also someone who's also very loving and kind. And he's suffered so much grief over his lifetime. We have the loss of his parents. His twin brother chose a mortal life, and so he eventually died. His wife has to leave Middle-earth after being tormented, and he ultimately loses his own daughter because she's going to choose to remain in Middle-earth with Aragorn. And so I think he's just a really stand-up guy. Like he's a good example, I think, of what a father could be.
And at his counsel, he is wise in not saying anything. Like he doesn't tell anybody what to do. And that's kind of I think that was a brilliant, the depiction of him in the movie was just amazing, of him sitting and observing everything. And that's kind of his way about the world, really.
Yeah. And like he's been there for so long. He knows when to speak and when to kind of sit there and let others speak. And he definitely just has a lot of wisdom to him.
Yeah, very cool. I know I always liked him, and again, the casting was great in the film. So, and I like what I forget the actor's name, but the actor in Rings of Power,
Robert Aramayo.
Yeah, so I liked his depiction so far, and I'm curious if we'll see him actually, see him becoming a father in the show, or if we'll see any of that timeline. I don't know if it quite matches up where the show probably will end, but maybe we could see something like that on the screen one day.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
Very cool. Well, I guess for me, so I kind of picked a couple that kind of go together, and so I'm going to start with Finrod, and who's not a father in the biological sense, because I don't believe he had children or ever married. I think the elf he loved was didn't want to marry him or something like that. I don't know as much about that, but for those who don't know, Finrod was one of the elves in the First Age, and before the First Age, but one of the kind of the highest elves, and he's actually the one that discovered men in Middle Earth, and and I'm counting him as a father because he basically kind of found these wild men in the woods, and he taught them Elvish culture, and taught them the language. And I from what I remember from reading this film, he kind of sang to them, and the men were like mesmerized by even if they didn't understand what he was saying, they were still kind of mesmerized. So he kind of took on this father role to the men, to this group that he met, which was the Edain, kind of the men that would end up becoming the Númenóreans. But specifically, he had a relationship with Barahir, who is the father of Beren. So in the Silmarillion, in one of the big battles, Barahir saves Finrod's life in one of the biggest battles of the First Age of the War of Wrath. And so Finrod kind of promises that he'll kind of take Barahir's descendants under his wing, kind of, and he gives Barahir his ring, who then, and unfortunately Barahir is eventually killed off by Morgoth's forces, but he then passes the ring on to Beren, who comes back to and eventually finds Finrod, and Finrod kind of honors his relationship with Barahir and kind of takes him under his wing a little bit, as well as eventually saving Beren's life in giving his own life. So just kind of a cool full circle thing with, he kind of took on this role of being a mentor to men and kind of a father to all men, and then specifically had these relationships with Barahir and Beren, and which led to him his death in Middle Earth, but he was reincarnated in Valinor. I think he's one of the few elves who dies in Middle Earth who is reincarnated, actually, that we know of in Valinor. I could be wrong on that. I'm not as familiar with it as y'all are, but so I think just that that whole dynamic between Finrod and Barahir and Beren is very cool. I don't know if anyone else has any other tidbits about those characters.
It's just a shame that we didn't get a little bit more of his information on his death in the Rings of Power, because I think viewers would have been really interested in that, because he kind of, when he's trapped in the dungeons of Sauron with Beren and the other elves who were with them, and Sauron is having them killed off one by werewolves until only Finrod and Beren are left. And Finrod essentially goes Super Saiyan. He gets so much strength that he breaks the chains that are holding him to the wall and then fights this werewolf to the death. They both end up killing one another. And so he has this incredibly heroic, over the top, but very, spectacular death that it's only hinted at in the Rings of Power, where you see the claw marks on his body. But, we're not really, a flashback later to that might be nice, because I think his character has such an incredibly heroic death that's so impactful to later events, because we all know how important Beren is in the lineage that eventually becomes the Númenóreans, and of course the heirs of Isildur. So he's a very, in some ways, kind of underrated character, but who, I'm definitely interested to see more of in future adaptations.
Yeah, he's so cool. He's probably one of the coolest elves, honestly. I mean, all of the elves are so cool, so it's hard to choose, but he's top 10 for sure.
Well, he's on the right side of almost everything. That's like it's not, there are not many elves that can say they're on the right side of almost all the decisions that were made.
Except maybe taking the Oath of Feanor. That is not good. But, with everything else, he's definitely on the right side of justice. Yeah,
and I'm wondering now, and I hadn't really thought about that. They were in Sauron's dungeon, and we could see, and now that Sauron, we know, is one of the main characters, if he comes face to face with Elendil before obviously their final battle, where Elendil dies, but we could get some reference to that of Halbrand Sauron saying, "I tortured your great 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 grandfather and your and etc." And if he could mention that to Galadriel about Finrod as well, so definitely could be some. They could put, sprinkle that in there if they want to. So, we
possibilities are endless, really.
Yeah. So we had a couple other fathers on the list, and anyone can kind of talk however that we've talked about the Valar, so if, we don't necessarily have to spend too much time on that, but I did put on here about Eru, Manwë, and Aule as kind of father figures, because as we know, Manwë's kind of he's the main Valar, aside from Melkor, and he is kind of the Eru's representative to creation, basically. So I don't know if anyone had anything to say about Eru as a father, or Manwë kind of as a father figure. I know with Aule we talked about his creation of the dwarves and saying he'll kill them, he'll destroy his creations, but Eru taking having mercy on them and actually giving them the breath of life, and so that they are now can now be fathers themselves, the dwarves.
Well, Aule specifically says that he made the dwarves precisely so that he could imitate his own father, Eru Ilúvatar.
Mm-hmm.
So the theme of fatherhood runs through that whole story of Aule and the creation of the dwarves. Just another reason why it's one of my favorite parts of the Silmarillion.
I also think it's cool to mention too that Ilúvatar means father of all in Quenya. So he really is he's the god of creation, the father to all.
Sort of baptizing that, and Tolkien was such a scholar of Norse mythology, he's sort of baptizing that title because the chief of the Norse gods, Odin, was called the All-Father.
All-Father.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So he's kind of bringing that into a more monotheistic Judeo-Christian kind of context.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, very cool. And then just going on my list here, I think we've kind of touched on the elves. The only other one I had put on here was, and for the elves, was Thingol, because he was the father of Luthien, who was the one who would marry Beren, and between them would create the line that leads to the Númenóreans and Aragorn. So Thingol wasn't always the best best father, and didn't always listen to his wife or anyone telling him what he should do. But he did, as any dad probably would do. He thought, this guy isn't good enough for my daughter, so you have to do something impossible, like, I don't know, give me a Silmaril.
give me a Silmaril from Morgoth.
Yeah.
Let's go.
I like how when Melian is unhappy with him, she's just silent and doesn't say anything.
It's funny because he's not going to listen to her anyways if she does say anything. So there's just no point. And she knows it.
Oh.
But her eyebrow game had to be strong,
I'm sure, yeah. She had that side eye glare kind of thing.
And then his plan backfires because he wants Beren to get killed doing this, and then Luthien's like, I'm gonna go with him. And so my daughter isn't old enough to date yet, and obviously, but I know one day I'll need to kind of keep these things in mind on what not to do.
Bring you back a Silmaril. That's
yeah, exactly.
Probably not the best idea.
Right.
But yeah, so but on here I'd put he's kind of not really a father. He's kind of more of a crazy uncle. But I did put on here Gandalf because he does kind of is a father figure. I would say probably more to Bilbo than maybe Frodo, and I feel like Frodo, he's more of kind of an uncle-ish too. But with Bilbo, he's I feel like there's more fatherhood there, and he's kind of saying, what have you been doing with your life? You need to get out and do something, instead of lazing around your house all day. And
suddenly you're the first adventure. You're a thief now. Here you go.
Right.
So I don't know if anyone had any other thoughts about Gandalf as a father, or. Well,
I think he offers a lot of guidance to the hobbits, to Frodo and Bilbo, but also to Aragorn too. He's I feel like he plays the mentor role very well to everyone around him. He's not going to tell you what to do, but he's going to help you make the most informed decision that you can. And he's not always going to be there at your side, but it's like whenever he's with you, he's always working to kind of to impart wisdom onto you and make sure that you're going to have everything you need for your own journey, because it's not his journey. It's he recognizes that it's your journey. So I think that's very fatherly of him.
Yeah, and he kind of passes on the lesson of mercy to Frodo from Bilbo, because Bilbo could have killed Gollum in the mountain, when he first met him, but Mercy stayed his hand, and then Frodo's, when they're on the quest for the ring to return the ring to Mordor, Frodo's like, well, should we kill him? And Gandalf kind of says, remember, your uncle showed mercy, and so he kind of passes that lesson of mercy along to Frodo. And then obviously they needed Gollum to get to Mordor in the first place. So he kind of had that wisdom to, it's always good to be merciful, and because you never know kind of what that'll lead to. And then I did, so moving right along from Gandalf to Bilbo. I put Bilbo on here just because he is a, he kind of adopts Frodo as his heir, even though he's his uncle. But since Frodo's parents they died, and so Bilbo took him in. I don't know if anyone had anything they wanted to say about Bilbo as kind of a father to Frodo. He's more, like I say, he's also kind of a fun uncle and kind of a
well, it's interesting.
Guy.
We call him his uncle, but technically he's both his first and second cousin once removed.
Yeah,
which it's a little odd, but okay. But yeah, no, Bilbo's one of my favorite characters in the Legendarium, and he seems to have been a very kind of hands-off father figure. He just let Frodo kind of be himself and grow into his own person. Although, he introduced him to Elvish and took him on walks through the Shire. It's not like he's trying to impose his adventuresome lifestyle or anything like that on Frodo. He really wants him to kind of be his own person. And to be the master of Bag End is why he leaves him everything. And he wants Frodo to have, a good life. It's just that he also knows, I'm passing on to you this thing which might end up ruining your life.
Yeah. It's dangerous. Yeah. Well, they don't even really know. Like that's the thing about the ring is such an interesting part of this, right? Because I feel almost like it's his fatherhood for Frodo that saves him in the end. Because he trusts Frodo. He's raised Frodo right almost. And that's what allows him to take that step to put the ring in to leave the ring behind and to walk away from it. And again, you see it when Frodo arrives at Rivendell and they meet and they talk, and Bilbo's again like struggling with this need to take the ring back from him, but it's that fatherly instinct that he has that prevents him from being able to do that. Not just a care for another person, but a care for this particular hobbit that he raised, that he cares for.
Yeah, and he even literally gives him protection. Like he protects him by passing on his mithril coat and his sword. I mean, he wouldn't have really had a use for it in Rivendell, but it's like something he could have, had he been a more central, if he was more concerned with money or anything else, he could have sold that off and gotten quite a bit of money for those. But he recognized that Frodo would need them as kind of, and they saved his life. So, and then I just thought this occurred to me today just to put on here, put the Gaffer on the list of kind of good dads to talk about, because even though he's Sam's grandfather, he's still he
or his
kind of gives a lot
father,
of
actually, right?
Oh, is his father? Okay, I don't know why I was thinking of grandfather. Okay,
it's because they always talk about him as really old.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know. Yeah, but it's just he's this very earthly guy, and you can definitely see that Sam gets a lot from him. All this wisdom and these kind of simple country things that that just have formed Sam into being such a good person. I don't know if anyone else said anything on Gaffer or Sam.
Well, I feel
wonder if he taught Sam how to clip the eaves.
Oh.
I feel like Sam is he's always like, what, as my Gaffer used to say, he's got all these little phrases of advice that kind of carry him through the story. So it's like, even though it's very simple, and I think it's meant to be humorous within the story, but it ends up being kind of profound, you know, like where there's life, there's hope and need of victuals. But like, it's simple, but it's all you need sometimes.
And Sam also has the father figure of his father-in-law, Tom Cotton, who's like who's like one of the, like, he comes out of nowhere at the end of the book as like this heroic hobbit figure, you know, and who, you know, has this big family and is one of the chief people in Bywater, and like he really takes charge with Merry and Pippin of the Scouring of the Shire. And so Sam's really lucky to have both. You know, they're two very different people. You know, the gaffer is kind of this, you know, quiet, retired gardener and font of wisdom, whereas Tom Cotton is more of a hobbit of action, you could say. But he has these two great examples and these two great men in his life.
And becomes a great man because of it. I mean, we don't know much about his, you know, we don't know much about his children, but you can assume that as he picks up the end of the tale, that he has a lot of wisdom and culture to bring back to his own children.
Yeah, very cool. Well, I had put on here, just since we've talked about, as we kind of did with the mother discussion last time, we kind of had the good moms, and then I put on here a couple kind of bad dads to chat about. So I'd put on here, I mean, obviously Morgoth is kind of the biggest one, because he kind of created a whole race of evil, you know, or of kind of bad things in the orcs, or he twisted the elves to become the orcs, and he's kind of a father to them. And I know so I don't know if we've talked about the Valar a lot and about Morgoth a lot, but I don't know if anyone else wanted to have anything to say about him as kind of as a bad guy, or as kind of an evil father figure, but as opposed to, you know, the good Valar that we've discussed.
I think Melkor or Morgoth is an example of someone who has been placed in a position with a lot of authority, who just abuses it with reckless abandon and no regard for anyone else. And you can see the way that he has no care for the welfare of anyone but himself. And you know, even with Ungoliant, who, you know, he's making these little deals with, but as soon as she starts asking for more than he's willing to give, like he'll turn on her. You know, he's just someone who does not care for anyone but himself. So he's definitely a example of an awful father figure.
And he's cursed, like he's spiteful. That's the thing and he's different from Sauron, because Sauron's not spiteful. Sauron is conniving and cruel, but he's not spiteful. Like, he doesn't have this sense of wanting to destroy everything. He wants to control everything. Whereas Morgoth is more, he just wants the world to burn. Like, that's his whole aim is just take the Silmarils. Why? Like, what's he going to do with them? There's not really any, he just takes them and then he goes and disappears and hides in a hole. And that's all he does with them. It's like, he doesn't need them to turn there's just no plan. It's just, I don't want anybody to have these things. I don't need them, but I don't want anybody to have them.
It's just pure greed.
He's just chaotic evil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, Sauron is more lawful evil, and Morgoth is just chaotic evil.
I'm interested because we've never really seen much of it portrayed, and in the Silmarillion we don't even really get hints of it, is what was the Morgoth-Sauron relationship like? Because Sauron's his lieutenant, and I guess I kind of always imagined it as maybe like analogous to the Megatron Starscream relationship from Transformers, except kind of reversed, I guess. Because, like, Thomas, you said, like, Morgoth has more of the Starscream personality,
right?
Spiteful.
Yeah, he just wants to
just wants to break things, takes it out on people. Whereas Sauron has more of the Megatron lawful evil kind of personality.
Yeah, it must have been interesting, like an interesting relationship, because he did train him, like he did teach him. That's the sense that we get from this, is that Sauron was brought up by Morgoth. And so you almost see the sense of like it's that just spiteful, awful father that produces this son who is out for himself because the world is an awful place. And that's the exposure that he's had, is this being that's more powerful than him, that has all the things that he thinks he wants. And he's just become twisted into this conniving, awful person that could be doing so many good things, maybe has, as they were trying to show in the Rings of Power, has the best of intentions, right? But is just not equipped to do them the right way.
Yeah, and I think about the way that Tolkien says that Sauron was only less evil because he had for a time served someone other than himself. So I think that kind of sheds a lot of light into the difference between the two as well, and a little bit about their dynamic.
Oh, very cool. And so along with kind of, we talked about the Silmarils a little bit, but I thought a good example of a bad dad is Fëanor himself, who kind of led to so many problems in Middle Earth. But he, for those who've not read the Silmarillion, he's the one who created the Silmarils in the first place, and then he became so jealous of his own creation, or jealous of anyone even seeing his own creation, he locked them up, and and then Morgoth stole or Melkor stole the Silmaril, or stole the Silmarils, and so that led to Fëanor, the Oath of Fëanor, which we mentioned, which I don't know if anyone wants to kind of give a brief summary of that or description of that.
Well, it's interesting, right? Because isn't that whole precipitated because Morgoth kills Fëanor's own father? Unless I'm mistaken.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of fatherhood dynamics in that story.
Yeah, and I think for Fëanor, it's more like he is jealous of the Silmarils, but when they're taken, it's, I don't know, like the hatred he has for Morgoth, for Melkor is just, it's unhinged. Like it's beyond even revenge. It's beyond jealousy. It's just completely wild, and it's so wild that that everyone else gets caught up in it. Just suddenly, like, you're right. This is awful. This is how, and it's one of those charismatic, just kind of hatreds that immediately drops right into the bottom of every elf that follows him. Their soul is just washed in it, and it's horrible to watch. But at the same time, you completely understand it. Like that's my sense of it. Like, he's this creature that's spiteful and evil and horrible, has just stolen all beauty from our existence. And the two responses are, okay, well, let's make new beauty and let's go kill it. And they all just like jump on the let's go kill it train.
Yeah, and it led to the first kinslaying between elves, the first elf slaying elf, which was just kind of unheard of at that point, and just so far against everything that they had ever known. So yeah, definitely he was kind of the greatest of elves, or could have been kind of the greatest of elves, but became kind of the worst of the elves, which so, well, and then kind of along with him and we kind of talked about him a little bit, I think, the last time when we were talking about Denethor's wife, the mother of Boromir and Faramir. But I put Denethor on here too as kind of he wasn't as bad as Fëanor and others, but he still kind of wasn't the best dad to his kids, or at least to one of his kids. It seemed like he and Boromir had they had a pretty good relationship, but at least with Faramir, he kind of, I think we kind of chatted about, he just didn't really care for him all that much. And which led to a lot of issues at the end, and even trying to kill him, to kill his own son, because he thought that was the way to go, to like, let's burn and we'll be reunited or whatever.
So to impose modern psychology on a figure, this is like epitome of narcissist here. He's got a golden child, that he loves, and then the other one that's like the scapegoat for everything. And he is he conceptualizes of himself as this very important historical figure. And yeah, he's just categorically not. But that's, you see in this guy like a person he's a king, but he's not really great at it. He's a father to these two sons who are fantastic people. Like both of them are very, very, very good men, despite having kind of this really wretch of a father. And you can see like those sort of relationships, like that's it, very definitionally like a narcissist, very full of himself. I can fill in many of the other phrases that were not put into the book, based on the way that he is with his sons.
The things he says are just awful.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah.
It's like,
and they're probably not. That's probably like not even the sum of what he was like. I could just
right.
Yeah, just,
and he kind of has that thing towards the end where like where Gandalf comes in and takes Faramir away from the house, and he's like, please don't take my son from me. And he's like, no, you're for his own safety, he needs to be separated from you. And at that point, he has nothing left. He just gets completely unhinged. He's like, fine. He's like, but you won't rule my own end then. And it's just like, wow. Like with every rereading, Deneth, like those scenes are such powerfully written scenes that like you don't understand Denethor, but you get the intense drama of those scenes with him and Faramir and wanting to just burn with everything. And the fact that like part of his crazy reasoning is that Gandalf was going to bring in this other guy, this ranger from the north, to supplant me, so I wouldn't be able to leave my chair to a son after me. So he's blaming other people for his own actions. This is Gandalf's fault, and it's just like, yeah, you're right, Thomas. He's just so unhinged, but at the same time, a very kind of pathetic figure in the old sense of that term. Like you kind of feel sorry for him, but I kind of go back and forth between feeling sorry for him and being like, well, fine, have it your way then.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's definitely not writing any parenting books.
Or if he is, you don't want to read them. That's
right. Yeah.
I think it all may have started with his wife's untimely death, because I think in the appendices it does say he did love her, and he even says after his fashion. So he did love her in his own way, and I think that that loss kind of started his sort of spiral into just more brokenness. He didn't know how to deal with it. And it's sort of like that need to like control. Well, if I could lose her, I could lose anything. And so that need to then control and hold on to stuff, I think leads him to start looking into the Palantir. Well, if I just know more about what's going on with Sauron and all that, I'll be able to control things. I'll be able to save. I'll be able to hold on to people so I don't lose them. But he ends up losing everything.
Yeah, and I think I may have speculated that Faramir took after his mother, and so maybe that's why Denethor kind of was more more of that way to wanting to push him away because it reminded him too much of his wife. But we don't know that. That's just my speculation. But could be headcanon for the moment, unless they discover another book of appendices or something down the road.
If only.
But well, I think unless anyone has any other father figures to discuss, I think that's all that I had. Did anyone else have any father figures or any other last minute things to say?
I think we covered most of the major ones pretty well. There's so many though.
Yeah.
So definitely viewers and listeners should tell us their favorites.
Yeah, and I know we didn't discuss Arathorn, but I think in a future episode we might dedicate to Aerithorn. So just stay tuned for that. But if no one else has anything, that's it for this episode of The Secrets of Middle-earth. We'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make the show possible, including Bart F., Martin W., Justin H., Adika L., and Tom V. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give help us to continue to create The Secrets of Middle-earth and all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them at sqpn.com/give. We'd love to hear from you. Which father in Tolkien is your favorite? And you can let us know at sqpn.com/middle-earth, on our Facebook page, or on Twitter. Send an email to middleearth@sqpn.com, or visit our channel on the StarQuest Discord server at sqpn.com/discord. So there is a new bit of content coming out that we wanted to discuss. So the Gollum video game is coming out, I believe, toward the end of May by the time this episode will have come out. So we decided it might be a good time to do kind of a discussion of Gollum as a character the next time. So stay tuned for that. So until then, Thomas Sanjurjo, thank you for joining me in The Secrets of Middle-earth.
Thanks, it's been a pleasure.
And Kaitlyn Facista, thank you as well.
Thank you.
And Thomas Sanjurjo, thank you so much.
Oops.
Thomas Salerno, sorry.
Thank you, Jack.
Sorry. And once again, I'm Jeff Haecker. Thank you for listening to The Secrets of Middle-earth on StarQuest.
Here's another show on the StarQuest network you're sure to enjoy, The Catholics of Oz. Find it wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/Oz.